What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Black Men Unfiltered. I'm glad you're here. Today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough. But not because it's not important, but because many men were never taught how to talk about it. So today's episode is called Love as a Black Man, the Truth Behind the Silence. Now, when people hear the word love, they usually think about relationships. They think about dating. They think about the marriage, the romance. But this conversation goes deeper than that, because before we can talk about how we love others, we have to talk about what we've learned about love ourselves. And for many men, love has always come with expectations. Be strong, be the provider, be dependable, handle your responsibilities, don't complain, and of course, don't show weakness. And while there's nothing wrong with being strong and showing strength, sometimes we become so focused on being strong that we forget we're humans also. We carry pressure, we carry responsibilities, we carry disappointments, we carry fears. And a lot of us carry those things quietly. And the truth is, many men have conversations in their heads that never make it out of their mouths. Thoughts nobody hears, questions nobody asks, feelings no one sees. Not because we don't have them, but because somewhere along the way, we learned that silence felt safer. So today, we pulling back those curtains. We're not pretending. We're not masking up. We're not filtering. Just an honest conversation about love, vulnerability, relationships, and the things many men are afraid to admit. Because sometimes the strongest thing a man can do isn't stay silent. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is tell the truth. So let's get into it. So let me start with a question, right? That question is, what are black men really afraid to admit when it comes to love? Not what we post, not what we say around our friends, not what we pretend doesn't bother us, but what are we honestly afraid to admit? I think for a lot of men, the answer isn't that we're afraid of love. We're afraid of what comes with it. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of being misunderstood. We're afraid of opening up and having our vulnerability used against us, right? We're afraid of giving our best and still not being enough. And if we're being honest, some of us are afraid of needing love at all. Because many of us were raised to believe that needing emotional support was weakness, right? That real men handle everything on their own. That real men don't cry. Real men don't struggle. That real men don't need help. But here's the problem with that. You can only carry that weight for so long before it starts affecting you. It affects your relationships. It affects your communication. It affects how you trust people. It affects how you show up in the world. And sometimes it even affects how you see yourself. And the truth is that many black men learn how to survive long before they learn how to express themselves. As black men, we learn how to keep moving. We learn how to keep working, how to keep providing, how to keep showing up. But nobody really taught us what to do with the emotions that we carry. Nobody taught us that healthy vulnerability, what that looks like. Nobody taught us how to process heartbreak. Nobody taught us how to talk about the loneliness. We've never were taught how to admit when we're struggling. So with all that, what happens? We get quiet. We become guarded. We tell ourselves we're fine, even when we're not. And over time, silence becomes a habit. Not because we don't have anything to say or anything, but because we've convinced ourselves nobody wants to hear that. I think that's why so many men feel alone, even when they're surrounded by people, because being around people and being understood are two totally different things. You can be in a relationship and still feel unseen. You can be surrounded by family and still feel unheard. You can have people around you every day and still carry things no one knows about. And that's why this conversation matters. Because love isn't just about finding someone. Love is about being known, being accepted, being understood, being enough, or being safe enough to be yourself. The reality is that many men are carrying questions they never asked out loud. Questions like, am I enough? Will somebody love me for who I am and not just what I provide? Can I be vulnerable without being judged? Questions like, what happens if people see the part of me that isn't strong? Those questions don't make a man weak. That just make him human. And maybe that's part of the problem. Many of us have spent so much time trying to be strong that we've forgotten we're allowed to be human too. That's what today's conversation is really about. It's not about weakness. It's not about complaining. It's not about blaming anybody. Just truth. The truth behind the silence. The truth behind the strong face. The truth behind the words we never say. Because healing starts with honesty, of course. And before we can build healthier relationships with others, we have to be honest about the walls we've built within ourselves. One thing that life has taught me is that a lot of men don't struggle with loving. They struggle with trusting. And there's a difference. Most men they have love to give, but the question is whether they feel safe enough to give it. Because every man has a story. Some stories are visible and others are hidden beneath the surface. Some men have been rejected. Some have been abandoned. Others have been cheated on. Some have watched relationships fall apart right in front of them. Some grew up without seeing healthy love at all. And whether we realize it or not, those experiences, they shape us. They shape how we communicate. They shape what we expect. They shape what we're willing to risk. I remember realizing that sometimes people aren't protecting their hearts because they're cold. They're protecting their hearts because they're tired. They're tired of being disappointed. They're tired of being misunderstood. They're tired of giving everything they have and still feeling like it wasn't enough. And after enough disappointment, you start telling yourself things. You start telling yourself not to get attached, not to get your hopes up, not to expect too much, not to trust too quickly. You become cautious. You become guarded. You become careful. And the problem is that eventually those walls become permanent. And what started as protection becomes isolation. Think about a house surrounded by walls. Those walls are meant to keep the danger out, but they also keep people out. The same thing happens emotionally. The walls that protect us from pain can also prevent us from experiencing those connections. That's why vulnerability is so difficult, because vulnerability requires risk. It requires allowing someone to see the real you. Not the strong version, not the polished version, not the version that has all the answers, but the real version, the one that gets tired, the one that struggles, the one that sometimes questions himself, the one that's still healing. And honestly, for some, that can get scary. Because when you spent so many years being the strong one, it's hard to admit you need support too. It's hard to admit you're carrying things. It's hard to admit that some days you're not okay. But here's what life has taught me. That the strongest men aren't the ones who never feel pain. The strongest men are the ones who refuse to let pain harden their hearts. Because pain can do one or two things. It can make you bitter, or it can make you wiser. It can make you close yourself off, or it can teach you how to love differently. The choice, it belongs to us. And here's the spiritual truth that I've learned also. That God never asks us to carry anything alone. Some of us has been carrying burdens that were never meant to be carried by ourselves. We've carried heartbreak. We're carrying the pressure. We're carrying expectations. We're carrying those disappointments. And we're doing this all in silence. But healing begins with honesty. Healing begins when we stop pretending. Healing begins when we acknowledge what we're carrying and bring it before God. Because the truth is, God already knows. He knows the fears you don't talk about. He knows the questions you don't ask. He knows the wounds you try to hide. And He isn't asking you to be perfect. He's asking you to be real. Maybe that's why so many men are exhausted. Not because life is hard, but because pretending to be okay when you're not is exhausting. Pretending you're not affected is exhausting. Pretending that you don't care is exhausting. Eventually, every man reaches a point where he has to decide, am I going to keep hiding behind the walls, or am I finally going to start dealing with what's behind them? Because you can't heal what you refuse to face. You can't experience deeper love while staying emotionally unavailable, not to others and not to yourself. So, after everything we've talked about today, the question becomes, now what? How do we become better men, better partners, better communicators, better versions of ourselves? I think it starts with understanding that growth doesn't happen overnight. There's no switch to flip. There's no magic formula. No moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Because growth is a daily decision, right? It's a decision to be honest. It's a decision to heal. A decision to keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable. Right? So let me leave you with 3 things that can make a real difference. Number 1, tell yourself the truth. Before you can be honest with everyone else, you have to be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, what am I carrying that I've never dealt with? What hurts am I pretending don't exist? What fears are affecting the way I love? A lot of men spend years running from conversations they run from conversations that they need to have with themselves, right? But healing begins with honesty. You can't fix what you won't face. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. Sometimes the most courageous conversations you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Which leads to number 2. Learn to communicate before the pressure builds up. Many men stay silent until they explode. They bottle up things. They push things down. They ignore what they're feeling. And eventually It comes out as anger, as frustration. It becomes distance. It becomes shutting down. But healthy communication isn't waiting until you're overwhelmed. It's learning how to express yourself before things reach that point. It's saying that I'm struggling, that I'm frustrated, that I need support, that something hurt me, that I don't know what to do. Because those words don't make you weak. They make you honest. And honesty creates connection. People can't understand what you're not communicating. And that leads us to number 3. Allow yourself to be human. And this one may be the hardest one, because many of us have spent our entire lives trying to be strong, trying to be dependable, trying to be the one everyone can lean on. But here's what I've learned. Being strong doesn't mean carrying everything by yourself. Being strong doesn't mean pretending you're never affected. Being strong doesn't mean hiding every emotions. Because real strength is having the courage to be authentic. Real strength is being secure enough to say, I don't have it all together. Real strength is allowing yourself to be human, because you're not a machine. You're not a superhero. You're a man. And men need grace also. Men need support too. Men need love also. The goal isn't to become a perfect man. The goal is to become an honest man. A man who knows who he is. A man who is willing to grow. A man who is willing to heal. A man who isn't afraid to tell the truth about what he's carrying. Because the moment you stop hiding is often the moment real freedom begins. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe the things we are afraid to admit are the very things that could set us free. Now ask yourself, what would change in my life if I stop pretending and start being honest? All right. Need you to sit with that for a second. What would change in my life if I stop pretending and start being honest? So this week, I want you to answer one question, maybe in a journal, in your notes app, or even in private to yourself. What is one thing I've never admitted about love, relationships, or myself? No filters, no pretending, no performing, just honest truth. Because growth begins where honesty starts. There's a quote. A man's greatest strength isn't hiding his heart, it's having the courage to heal it, protect it, and still keep it open. So, as we wrap up today's conversation, the final thought is, love isn't just about finding the right person. It's also about becoming the right person. And that journey starts with honesty. Honesty about what you've been through, honesty about what you're carrying, honesty about what still needs healing. Because for a long time, many of us were taught that strength meant staying silent. That strength meant handling everything on our own. That strength meant never letting anyone see us struggle. But maybe the real strength looks a bit different. Maybe real strength is having the courage to be seen, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to tell the truth, and the courage to heal. Because at the end of the day, every man wants to be understood. Every man wants to be valued. Every man wants to know that who he is matters, not just what he does. And if you're listening to this today, I want you to remember this. You don't have to carry everything alone. You don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not. You don't have to hide behind the version of yourself you created just to survive. Because there is strength in honesty. There is freedom in vulnerability. And there is growth in facing the things you spent years avoiding. So remember, this week, just challenge yourself to be a little more honest. Be a little more open, a little more willing to let people see the real you. Not everybody deserves access to your heart, but don't lock the door on everyone because of what a few people did. Keep growing, keep healing, keep becoming the man God created you to be. And I thank you for spending time with me today. And if this episode spoke to you, I ask that you share it with someone who needs it. Also follow the podcast so you can join me for the next conversation. And until then, this is Black Man Unfiltered. Real voice, real truth, real growth. And remember, not every silent man is strong. Some are simply unheard.